Hey, thanks guys for joining us for another episode of Tribe Calls, where basically I share with you, the professionals, the people that I'm connected with, the resources that I have. I share with you their knowledge, and they share with us. So I'm super grateful today to have Rob Perez on the call. We're not going to overwhelm you with like data points and slides and graphs and charts. We're not gonna geek out too much. We're just gonna have a real conversation about what we're seeing in the real estate market right now. And Rob comes with us, ton of experience in real estate. He's the guy I call when I have questions about oddball things and need some help. So I'm excited to bring you here today. And here we go. I'm bringing him in right now. He's waiting for us backstage. So now here, I'm gonna bring him in right now.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, wow. Hey, thanks for being here, man. I think if anybody's watching this and you think that you could, maybe do some good job like hyping up the show and bringing on guests, we might need to outsource that. We might need someone else to bring in our guests.
Sounds good.
Hey, Rob, thanks for being here. So, you know the flow. We're going to. I want to know for sure, like a little bit more. Just want to know a little bit more about you. Like maybe you could share some of your background just for context, and then kind of want to dive into like why is this market crazy? Is this market crazy? And hopefully, everybody watching here today can just take away some information to have more powerful conversation, better conversations about real estate instead of just, falling into the trap of saying, hey, it's crazy or it's insane or whatever. Maybe have a little bit more knowledge and background behind it.
Sure. Well, I'm Rob Perez. I've been appraising in the appraisal industry since 1998. So I guess 23 years. Does that sound about right? Before that, I was in the Army. Moved out to California in 2001. I'm currently the Real Estate Appraisal Association chapter president for Sacramento. I'm on the board of directors as a treasurer for REA as well. I've been appraising in Sacramento since 03. Yeah.
Where were you working? So you've been an appraiser since '98. Where were you at before?
Colorado.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then out there they have basements, and when I first moved out here without basements, I was like, hey, no basements.
What's missing?
It turns a 1,600 square foot house into a 3,200 square foot house pretty easily.
Yeah. You come across them every now and then, right? Like in Sacramento and stuff like that?
You do, but it's not the same as it is in Colorado. Because
okay.
you have some areas you have higher water tables here, but in Colorado it's pretty prevalent. If you didn't have one, it was weird.
Yeah. Huh. So so you're an appraiser here. You've been appraising since 2003. Like, who are some of your primary clients, or who do you do appraisals for?
Sure, mainly for lenders, but we do a lot more lately of estate attorneys. If somebody passes, they would need an appraisal to establish a basis. People going through a divorce. Sometimes we do appraisals for agents like yourself. If it's a really strange property and trying to get an idea of what the property's worth. Pretty much anybody that needs to figure out what their home is worth, or somebody selling to a neighbor a piece of land or a house.
Yeah. I know we've worked together on at least one for sure that I was thinking like, man, I don't know if I can price this right. And then I've also reached out to you quite a few times to make sure that the size is right.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. And what's considered living area and which wouldn't be considered living area as well. He was one of the ones that you had.
Yeah, and except one of them was just like the square footage was just way off, and it's like we want to get that right, especially if we're going to go on market. The tax record says it's 1,800 square feet, but we know it's 3,000, and we want to dial that in. So
and I've had the converse as well, to where tax record was showing like 2,800 square feet, and it actually turned out to be 1,800 square feet, and it was just a total error on the tax record side.
Yeah. So that could be actually something that's important if you're living in a home right now and your tax record shows that you're 3,000 square feet and maybe you haven't bought or sold the house in a while and it's been that way. Like you might want to have an appraisal done, might want to have it reassessed, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So in terms of like in appraising and in your business, where do you look to for more up to date information, guidance on your business? Where do
Actually,
you?
actually talking to people just like you to see where buyers are on the market, what they're thinking, what they're looking for, what they want, what's important to them, what's not important to them. Um, Pretty much, the trend is more and more is not having fireplaces in new construction. There's not a big desire for fireplaces, and so that's not a really big adjustment. I mean, aside from the outdoor fireplaces, but in a home typically is not a desire, not a desired item, but as a desired item.
Yeah. So okay. So why is it important? Because it's not a. So why is it important to know about like buyer preferences and what's trending?
That way, it tells us what a buyer is willing to, a normal house, everything else held constant. A buyer is willing to pay X amount more for a pool, and that's a highly desired item. You can kind of figure out what that's worth.
Okay, cool, makes sense. All right, actually, I love that you brought that up because I've been having some conversations right now about pools.
Sure.
Um, let's go there for a second. It's not part of my planned agenda, but
Sure.
but um, so typically, How much does a pool help improve your value? Maybe let's say like last year, how much did or pre-COVID, if anything has changed?
That's a depends question, but I mean, depending on which neighborhood you're in, the best way I can approach it without giving you an exact number is if you have a house that's selling without a pool, you have an exact model match, no difference, same time frame. One sells for, let's just say, 20,000 more than the other, then you kind of can figure out your adjustment that way.
Okay.
Some areas to where you have lots of acreage and very, very large pools and very ornate waterfalls, you would definitely probably adjust a little more. Some areas to where you have like a fiberglass pool, maybe a little less.
Got it. So it really depends on like the area that you're in and what other. How do you go? Do you Would you go as far back? Like, let's say a house didn't. I don't know. I'm just kind of hitting you with some random type
Sure,
of
yeah, go for it.
Let's say a house, no houses in the neighborhood have sold with a pool in the last year. You know,
Yeah.
you ever go back like 2 or 3 years to see kind of what the difference was back then? Like a home with a pool sold uh, 3 years ago, and that same year, kind of a model matched
Sure.
home without a pool. Do you ever do something like that?
Yeah, I've actually, it's not common, but I have gone back 4 years and time adjusted forward. Um, but when you do that, there could be a different demand for a pool back 4 years ago versus now.
Mm.
So you always want to make sure you check competing market areas currently. Even though it's not in your neighborhood, you want to see what other competing neighborhoods would sell for with pools and without pools.
It seems to me that right now, just in terms of like market demand, the demand for a pool is high. Personally, I used to price homes
Yeah,
about 30K, and this is in Roseville, right? So like I would usually be around 30K higher if I had a pool, depending on the size and stuff.
sounds about right.
But now it's almost, and so back when I was doing that, to buy a pool was still about 50,000. So I'm like, yeah, you don't really get your full value out of it.
And I think it boils down to backyard livability too, where the pool encompasses also outdoor kitchen and an outdoor patio area and fire pit and all that kind of comes into play.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it seems to me that lately, just because of the demand, like I hear so many people say that a pool's a must. We're getting so many people coming from out of area that they're like, hey, I heard it's really hot here. We have to have a pool.
Sure.
it seems to me it's almost like dollar for dollar. Like if you spent 50 grand on building a pool, you might probably get 50 grand out of it on resale. Uh, but maybe that's just right now, and that's because we're in this crazy market, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right, for context for everybody, like how many appraisals do you typically do, like, in a day or in a week?
It really depends. Lately, I've been doing more complex appraisals, which take longer.
Okay.
But standard tract homes, if I had a whole week of standard tract homes, probably anywhere from 9 to 15 in a week.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How has COVID changed that at all? Are you doing more or less, or is it just harder?
It feels like it's hard because the motivation is a little less. It seems with the COVID.
Okay.
So it's hard to stay on track. When kids were working out of the house to doing their schoolwork, it's more distracting. But now they're back in school, so getting back to it.
Okay.
Definitely, I have some people that do not want me to come in the house. Some lenders will approve an exterior only appraisal, but it has to be a lender approved. I'll measure the outside of the house and not go in at all. Definitely always when I go into a house, mask and booties. And then obviously sanitize before in and out.
Yeah.
Just follow all the guidelines. When I'm outside, I get everything done that way. Measure everything's pretty much the same, but inside's a little different. But ultimately, the inspection itself is pretty much the same.
Okay. So a little bit of taxing on your motivation.
For sure.
So let's dive into it, man. I want to talk about like the real reason, I kind of asked you to be on here is just I can't help but say how I'm guilty of it also, right? When people ask like, hey, how's the market? Crazy is a word that I use sometimes. And
crazy seems to be the right word right now.
Well, so what I want to find out from you is why. Why is it the right word? Like, why do you say crazy? To me, this is kind of a side note, but I stopped using the word I'm confused, right? Because confused just means you're in a state where you're not confused. You just maybe don't understand the question, or you don't understand the question. I got rid of confused. I'm trying to get rid of crazy. I'm trying to come up with a more empowering description of what's going on. So, but tell me though, like, why do you say it's crazy?
The main one right now is lack of inventory.
Yeah.
We were talking about this before about how the amount of inventory right now is probably lower than most any point in the past 5 years.
Yeah.
With low rates, people are looking to either to buy something and get it, lock it at a low rate, but with no inventory, there's going to be pressure on sales prices.
We have, definitely like inventory. I feel like maybe my people are annoyed with me by now because like every week or I'm going on saying like, hey, do you have a house to sell? Because I need a house to sell. But it's true. Like there's a serious lack of inventory, and then you mentioned the low rates. Coupled with the lowest amount of inventory we've ever seen.
Yes.
You have the lowest rates we've ever seen, and because of that, the highest amount of demand.
And probably with COVID and employment, probably the most unsure time too, as well.
Sure. Well, so speak to that a little bit. Like, do you have any kind of leading indicators that unemployment is going to have an impact on this area, or what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I mean, even though unemployment is still low relatively, I think there's uncertainty. Even if you're employed, you may be not sure that you may lose your job or not lose your job, and buying a new house may not be, or selling your house and going through that whole process may not be, ideal. So that may cause people not to want to move anywhere right now.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, cool. That makes sense. I mean, not cool, but yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I told everybody we weren't going to overwhelm them with charts and data and stuff, but I thought maybe I would just show this one that we were talking about earlier. So this is the trends graphic. I mean, I'm sure this shows this is just Roseville too. So I know, Rob, you do basically the whole Sacramento area, but obviously I'm pretty heavily focused in Roseville, so I use this. But so this is just the last 5 years. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna actually show an even better one. Let's go the last 15 years because we can do that now.
Yeah, that's right.
So the light green, for everybody watching, the light green is the amount of homes that are for sale at the end of a quarter. And the dark green are the amount of homes that sold at the end of a quarter. And so pretty consistently, people were about the same amount of people, plus or minus 50, were buying, right? All the time. Except, wait, what'd you say?
I said there were options for sure in 07. Yeah, you had your choice.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and so what's wild is 07, that was when everything kind of halted and the inventory took a big spike, right? But even 05, nothing had paused yet. There was still a pretty healthy amount of homes available.
Yeah, because 06 was the start of the tip over, and then it just kind of bled out after that. Yeah.
So, and then here clearly, a lot of inventory, and then it started to dry up, right? Because prices were going down, so everybody's buying.
Yeah, but your last inventory, light green bar, was our current one. It's the lowest out of all that. I mean, by far.
Oh, yeah, the last trend here.
Oh, no, and I'm sorry, the last one on the poll graph, the 2020.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, showing that versus...
in comparison, right? Well, so over the last 10 years, we've been in a seller's market.
Yeah.
And so now, I said the other day, I was like, this is the sellerist market we've ever seen.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an official word, but...
And the only thing, that's, not a big problem, but an issue is the sellers have to buy something else usually, or rent.
Yeah.
And rents are higher than they've ever been as well.
Hey, you do rent assessments, or it's not a rent appraisal, is it?
Rent survey.
Rent survey, do you do those?
I do.
So historically, do rents go down ever?
I haven't seen it yet, but right now they're doing the same thing as the home prices currently.
Yeah. So there's a potential that it could fluctuate. What about back in 06? Did rents go down?
Honestly, I don't recall. Okay. I don't remember it that well.
Yeah.
But
a blur.
Yeah.
Blocked it out.
Pretty much.
Yeah, this is wild. So I mean, for everybody watching, I share this in my buyer and seller consultations strategy sessions. But this is the last 5 years. We're in a seller's market. I mean, we've been in the seller's market for the last 10. Light green are the homes left for sale. Dark green are the homes that sold. The same amount of demand has always kind of been there.
Yeah.
But now when you look at this last year, we have increased amount of demand. Way more people are buying, and a significant decrease in supply, right, or in the homes left for sale. So,
and something to bring up too is when there's this high demand, externalities like power lines and backing traffic matter less than when there's plenty of inventory.
Okay.
There's less of a hit on it, it seems.
That's a really good point. So if you had if you had an appraisal or a CMA or
this is in general, not because I always try to do it specific to a neighborhood in the house, but in general, yeah.
Yeah. So if you're watching this right now, or if you know somebody or if you're watching this and you know somebody that lives on a busy road or lives next to power lines, their assessed market value, whether it was an appraisal or a CMA from an agent or a broker price, whatever, there's a pretty good chance that because of the shortage of inventory we had right now, it's not going to take as big of a hit basically as it did when they assessed it.
Yeah, it just, the market doesn't see as big of a hit from what I've seen.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that for that, whoever's house that is, it's going to work out exactly that way, but from what I've seen, that's what I've noticed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point. If I wasn't happy with my amount or my assessed market analysis a couple of years ago, I'd probably be rechecking that now.
Possibly, yeah.
So, what do you think is going to happen? Like,
that's a great question. There's so many things that could happen. I mean,
yeah. Let's just. I mean, we're not going to hold. This is recorded, and I'm going to, replay this in 6 months and see if you're true. But other than that, I'm not going to hold you to it. Let's just play. Make some bold predictions. Like, what do we see happening in the market?
It could turn out that it was COVID that was slowing down the inventory. Possibly, if things go as they're supposed to, and everyone's vaccinated and everything starts to die down that way, it's possible that inventory comes back up in 6 to 12 months. Usually the winter time, we usually have less transactions during the winter, as on your chart. So that could come into play too, or there could be built up demand that would just kind of negate that, but it's a possibility. Could turn out that the overall demand right now and pushing prices could reverse itself and correct in the next 6 to 12 months, so it can go the opposite way. There's moratoriums on people paying rent, a moratorium on foreclosures. When that stops, that could have an impact on the market as well. There's so many ways this can go.
What do you think? I mean, it's tough, man, because there's so, like you said, there is so many ways to go. Like, if you had to say, I'm 51% sure of this way versus the other way.
I wish I was 51% sure. I'm not even there. But
how about a 34 instead of a 33?
Say again?
So how about a 34% instead of a 33.3%? You got anything that you're a little bit stronger on?
For my appraisals, I'm lucky. I can only have to do it on the day of is the market value as of that day. I don't have to forecast anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm happy about that, to where I don't have to forecast. Man, I don't know. I really don't. It's a crapshoot.
Take a lot of inventory to kind of. It would take a significant amount of inventory at this point, and a significant decrease in buyer demand.
Yeah.
In order for this chart to really change anytime soon.
Yes. And honestly, I mean, Roseville was slotted for a shortage anyway for housing, even before 2020.
Yeah. Are you doing appraisals on new home construction?
I am, yes.
You seeing any uptick there? Or, I mean, it seems to me that they're trying to build as fast as possible, but it's still
coming up short.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where do you think the opportunities are for if I'm a buyer and I'm looking at this, I'm like, ah, man, I don't have a shot. Or if I'm a homeowner, I'm a seller, and I want to sell and go buy something else. This is pretty discouraging. This is been a downer of a tribe call. Normally, my tribe calls are super positive and uplifting, and this is just like,
Yeah, I mean, if you're a seller selling your home, I mean, the initial point is, great because I'm going to get a fantastic value. But once you sell it, you have to go somewhere. Like I said, rents are high right now, and inventory is low, so you may be struggling to find a replacement house.
and so where do you think, clearly the opportunity as a seller is you're selling during the sellerist market ever,
Yeah.
right? Like there's very little inventory. The demand is incredibly high. Like the odds are stacked in your favor. Where do you think where are the opportunities maybe as a home seller where you could, or like, oh, sorry, so the home sellers are they're good, right? For the most part. Do you see any opportunities for home buyers? Like I know you work with attorneys, you work with uh, estate attorneys and family attorneys. Like, is there you see like a wave of foreclosures or any like where could be like a competitive edge maybe that a buyer might have?
Man, I honestly wouldn't be able to know that one.
What's that?
I wouldn't know that one, honestly.
Okay.
It's just like you said, I mean, with such little inventory, there's not a lot of options for a buyer currently, and there's multiple offers on the homes that are out there.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm doing right now, and quite honestly, I've been doing this for a long time, but this chart represents the homes that are listed for sale in MLS, and this chart represents the data that's available in MLS.
Oh, sure.
It doesn't represent like all of the homes that exist in the marketplace. So couple of things I'm doing. Like one thing I'm doing is reaching out to homeowners, just calling them and mailing stuff to them and saying, hey, do you have any intention on selling your home? Would you like to bypass the process of selling it on the market and just sell it to qualified buyers now? Maybe the other thing, like especially if any real estate agents or home buyers are watching this right now, like I know, Rob, you mentioned there's been a slight uptick in death and divorce, and I mentioned it too, right? Like that's what I've heard. So like maybe that could be an opportunity too. Like just, hey, like is there any houses that you know of that are going to become available because somebody died, somebody
for selling probate or through the state?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes, it's possible. I mean, but it would take quite a bit to change these numbers around.
Yeah. Oh, in terms of like, actually like bringing that light green bar up.
Yeah, it would take quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, with any market, I mean, it's going to change. I mean, whether it's low now or high later, you can always guarantee it's going to change something.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the beast.
Wayne. Come on, Rob, give me a bold prediction.
I wish I could, but man, it just there are so many avenues. Like the Choose Your Own Adventure book, and you have 8,000 options. I mean, there's just no way to predict it.
You know what I think is going to happen in the next 6 months?
What do you got?
So we do have a shortage of inventory.
Yes.
Right? The demand is strong. However, what I see happening already is home sellers and quite honestly, the agents that they're working with, they're a little bit too cocky right now, and not yet, and not too cocky yet, but they could be in about a week or 2 weeks.
Sure.
Because we're going into springtime, and this is when the inventory starts to hit, and this is when you really want to make sure that you're bringing your property to the market the right way, even in like this super low environment. And I think I see some people way shooting for the moon in terms of pricing.
Yes.
And so there might be some pockets of opportunity over the next like 2 to 3 months to grab some of those listings that sat for 3 weeks, which in this market is like,
Sure. Yeah. I can see that.
I don't know if I mean, that's not going to be enough to drive up the light green, but, or to double or triple the light green, but it could be enough to,
To
grab
start the trend the other way.
Yep.
Huh. Yeah, that's very possible.
And then my second prediction is that, and you touched on this too, just with the, with the confidence that might come from vaccinations, right? Like they say every adult will have a vaccine, or there's enough vaccines for every adult. And then by the end of what?
May.
By the end of May. So I met with a homeowner the other day. She's a 77-year-old woman. And actually, I've seen her out and about in the neighborhood before, and she was, walking and stuff during COVID times, and masked and stuff, even on her outside walk and everything. And so you could tell there was a certain level of caution there, right? I went over to her house though the other day, and I had my mask, and I said, "Hey, I got my mask." She's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. I got my vaccine." Come on. And I don't know. There's probably a mask. Whatever your beliefs are around it, it's okay. But what I took from that is the amount of confidence that she immediately has after.
Exactly.
So I think that could mean that everybody that didn't sell last year, that specifically for the reason, the fear of the health,
uncertainty. Yeah.
Yep. I think that they could come to the market, which again, I don't think it's enough to double our numbers, but it's enough to maybe have a dent in the option.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
All right. Well, that's exactly why I brought you on here today, to make sure I was reasonable and not crazy. All right. So, more powerful language. If people ask you, how is the real estate market, instead of saying crazy, tell them inventory levels are low, buyer demand is high.
Yeah. And it depends. That's I always like to say, it depends. It really does depend on your specific market.
Sure. I guess your intentions too, right? Like,
yeah.
What are you trying to do? You trying to buy? You trying to sell?
Exactly.
Invest?
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you. Thanks for jumping on. I'm sure.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. And if anybody wants to reach out to you, I think I have it. This video is saved in a blog post. Your contact information is there. I know you're a huge resource for me when it comes to making sure square footage is accurate. I refer you to clients that are doing like off market or like family transactions, estate attorneys, divorce situations for appraisals. So you're a huge resource, and I appreciate you, man. Thanks for.
Thank you. And you as well. I mean, the road goes both ways.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, awesome. Any parting words from Mr. Rob Perez?
Happy Friday.
There we go.
All right, thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for watching, everybody.